Gonna have to stare at my back for a little bit, but yes. So good afternoon. Right, what people want, what young people want. Last year, as Nick said, a few insights, maybe some jaw-dropping, hopefully some insightful, as to what young people considering their careers were looking for in those jobs. And some of you in the audience were here last year, but just a very quick recap. I, on behalf of our work stream, interviewed 32 students aged 13 to 23 and came out with a bunch of insights, some of which, let me get the negative piece out of the way first. I'm going to definitely end on a very positive piece, I reassure you. But we had insights like, why would I want to join an industry that bombards me with rubbish? And we heard, I think, in the morning presentations, some of the sentiments around that as well. I presented 4 themes last year that were coming out of those interviews, and probably the most dominant and maybe one of the most jaw-dropping was, what do those young people, those 32 people, want from their career? Not just a career in advertising, but just their careers generally. And the answer was money. And not for today. If anybody's interested in the 5 reasons why behind that answer of money, I would be very happy at the end of the day or in an email exchange to go through that. But also, at the end of last year, we, our work stream and Advertising Who Cares, committed to undertake a quantitative survey to try to put some numbers to the hypotheses, to the themes that emerged from our qualitative interviews. In addition, we thought, okay, I'm going to present a highlight of those numbers very shortly. In addition, what other context, texture could we bring to the audience today? And I'm very grateful to the whole group, and I'm going to introduce them to you by face and name very shortly, but particularly Jackie Almeida in our group, who said, well, look, yes, these 32 people that we interviewed last year surfaced some issues which would suggest that advertising is low down on the list compared to the civil service, for example, which was the most popular choice, by the way, for reasons which, again, I'm happy to explain. But, okay, if advertising's, relatively speaking, low down on the list, the fact is there's still some great talent coming into the industry, so it can't be all that bad. Why don't we go and speak to them? So the second part of my presentation, before I come on to have a discussion with Aaron and Divine, is looking at the insights from 18 interviews that I did on behalf of our workstream group with people in their careers 1 to 5 years. So they're relatively new to the career, and as you will see, a dominant part of that we were looking for people who are pursuing careers in advertising in its broadest definition. So I'm going to present some insights from that. To give you an idea of methodology, the quantitative survey that we put out, and I'm very grateful to our friend from Seattle who asked the question in the last one, Kevin, from the Sticks company, and his platform Mindload, in combination with Colin from Test Set. Very thankful to both of them. We did, for those of you who are familiar with research methodology, it was a snowball sample, i.e. we put it out there. Does anybody want to fill out this survey within certain criteria that were screened out at the beginning, but it wasn't probability sampling in terms of trying to get a NatRep example, sample or whatever. But the key criteria was that these 200 people had to be in full-time education. About 60% were at university and about 40% in sixth form, school, college, whatever. Just FYI, 57% from memory were women, 40% were men, and 3% identified as transgender or non-binary. And age-wise, the predominant sample, 18 to 21, which would reflect the strength of the university population, 40% were 18 to 21. Interestingly, 26% were over the age of 25, yet still in full-time education. Now that could be postgrad, masters, MBAs, etc. And then in the qualitative, 18 people, as I mentioned, years 1 to 5 in their career. And this was convenient sampling, i.e. we're pulling in favours. Does anybody want to be interviewed within our workstream network, within the wider Advertising Who Cares network? So one has to acknowledge, as one always does with research, what the limitations are. But nonetheless, I hope you'll find that the insights are interesting and relevant, but also, like all good research, it should be there for illumination rather than necessarily answering questions specifically. I mentioned the workstream members. I'm very grateful to the 10 people who contributed very voraciously and put a lot of time into supporting this workstream. You can see their names and faces here. So, on to the quantitative. There's a lot more detail, but I just want to give you a few highlights. So, the first question I wanted to share with you was around geographic destination. Where did these 200 people intend to live? Where do they intend living once they leave education? You can see the blue bar on the left-hand side is London. I say you can see, maybe at the back you can't, but it's London, 29%. Hometown in England, 21%. No idea, 20%. Or another major English city, 12%, and then we go down. Now, the 29% for London, there could be several reasons behind this. It could be that they're returning home, and that is reflected in some other data. It could be the predominance of job opportunities, or a combination of all of those things. This is sort of expanded on when asking the question, what do you expect your domestic arrangements to be when you start work? And again, if you look at the blue bar on the left-hand side, 30% say that they plan or intend to go back and live with their parents. Now, we hear and see that in the media as well, the whole idea of boomerang kids, boomerang young people. So maybe that's not surprising. The 3 bars, the red bar renting with friends, the green bar 14%, and renting by myself, there's a big chunk, I think it's about 48% if that adds up correctly, of people who anticipate renting somewhere in some shape or form. And interestingly, in the middle, 20%, owning my own place. Now, given the issues around money, interested to understand, quant can take you so far, but what's the reason behind that? It may be that that was answered by more of the sixth formers, for example. I don't know, but it might be their sort of halcyon view of what's going to happen when they leave university and be able to have a great salary and be able to buy their own place. Or it might be that some people are very fortunate and inherit money, bank of mum and dad, bank of grandma, grandpa, whatever it might be. But take this data for what it is. In terms of career selection criteria, and this is where there was a slight difference, if you like, from the qual that we did last year. Please rank the following criteria in the importance, in the order of their importance to you when it comes to choosing what kind of work you want to do. Now, in the qual last year, it was about, I want a job that's going to pay me really well. It wasn't the only thing, but I think it's fair to say it contradicted the prevailing view, maybe from boomers and Xers, that it's all about work-life balance. And those of you who were here last year, remember I characterized it as not work-life balance. Work-life balance, it was money-life balance. But if you look at the top statement, providing foundations for a long-term career, makes perfect sense. They want something, and I'm going to come back to this idea of long-term planning. Doing something that is good for the world. Now, these are prompted statements, so they are giving a response to those, whereas the qual that we did last year was inviting opinions, and therefore that's where the money thing and maybe the doing good for the world came slightly lower down. Allowing me to work when and where I want to, post-COVID, that coming through. Fun and sociable environment where people don't take themselves too seriously. That's interesting. That will be a theme that I refer to in, come back to in the qual. And. The next chart is a very heavy word chart, so let me reveal that, come with a health warning. We put 20 statements in front of these 200 people and asked them to rank them by level of agreement. So I'm just going to highlight some, and I know the slides will be distributed after this, so you can chew over this in more detail. I don't want to ever stop learning new skills and applying them was the number one ranked criteria or statement. And I am going to come back very firmly to that theme because it was something that came through in the qual. I want to have work friends that I can have a social life with too. And I'm going to come down to number 9. The problem with interesting or creative jobs is that you don't generally earn that much. Okay, it's down at number 9 in terms of the ranking, but interesting correlation with the money point. Number 10, I don't expect my work to be what gives me my life purpose. That comes from other stuff. And again, if we think about work-life balance, and I characterize it, as I said, as money-life balance, then we start to get an insight like, okay, some people will go, I want to work to earn as much money as I can. Recap of the qual last year, they said, look, I will work 12, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week until I'm 40. And if I'm still alive when I'm 40, I will have accumulated enough money and enough safety net to last me the rest, the rest of my life. So that statement there sort of suggests that it's not necessarily work that is going to give them that purpose in life. Have you considered one of the following career sectors? Now, unlike the qual last year, which was spontaneous, what sort of careers are you considering? And that's where the civil service came out top across all 32 people. Why? Quick aside on that. For those who weren't here last year, it was all about stability, structure, and for, if I can call them this, maybe the elite graduates who want to join the Foreign Office, the Secret Service, intelligence services. They see the opportunity of traveling the world, being paid to travel the world, that kind of thing. In the quant survey, we prompted. We put careers out there, which is why, maybe reassuringly, you can see the second bar, 10%, next to civil service, just over 10% actually, is advertising and marketing. Now, that could be, I think, a reflection of two things. One is we put advertising and marketing in there, so we were prompting it, but also the sampling, a convenient sampling, 200 people, initially starting through our network and out beyond. It may be that those people who answered the survey were those who had friends and family in the industry. They may have been more familiar with advertising and marketing. It's just my speculation, my hypothesis. What else do we have? Number 3, entrepreneurship. I'm doing some research for a couple of universities in a completely different context, so it's not being pure about it, not necessarily relevant to bring that in. Nonetheless, working for myself when I graduate does come up quite frequently. It may be, and this is a phrase I'm going to come back to later, blind optimism, but I think part of it is actually I can be in control of my own destiny and I'm not beholden to other people. What else have we got? Banking and finance comes in at number 4, television and media, tech, and then we start to see a fall off law, medicine, non-profit, local government, down to armed forces and social services. We had some open-ended questions at the end, and what we did was kind of cluster and do a bit of a thematic analysis around those. So when asked in 10 words or less, please tell us the one thing that worries you most about the prospect of working life. The most dominant theme from the words that came through in the open-ended question was being overworked and underpaid. Secondly, stress and poor work-life balance, even though money-life balance may be the thing, but you can start to see the theme, the correlation coming through. Not ending up in the right job, and then scary pressure and beyond. So if that's what worried them, what excites them about their future career? Making money, number one, which was 48%. New people and new experiences, becoming independent. Number 4, making a difference. Okay, we're starting to see possibly the purpose coming through. So that's a very quick overview of the quant. If anybody has any questions, wants to see more detail, myself and indeed Kevin, I'm sure, would be very happy to share that with you. Let me give you some insights into the qualitative that we did. Firstly, in terms of the 18 people we spoke to, it is fair to say all of them had university degrees. One had a degree apprenticeship. So I appreciate that with, I think it is 37% of school leavers going on to university, it is not a wholly representative sample. And indeed, therefore, there may be very talented people who don't go to university, end up in advertising, or indeed any other career choice. So please accept this as a relative limitation. However, what is interesting are the qualifications of the 18 people have. I'm not going to go through each of these in detail, other than to say that I think it's quite an interesting mix of what one might see as vocational degrees, like marketing, but also foundation art and design, but also mixed in with some humanities and some science. Indeed, an Indian lady who I interviewed is the bottom right-hand one, master in tech degree in India, and then she's come over here to do her master's in marketing, communications and advertising. So a really interesting mix. Those of you who were here last year might recall me saying that my first boss in advertising had a degree in Byzantine architecture, had nothing to do with advertising, but had everything to do with 2 key skills that I think are essential for a successful career in advertising, or indeed a successful career generally, which are curiosity and critical analysis. And I think across those degrees, I would guess that they've got or have been encouraged by the universities there. But please accept the limitation of we interviewed university students. In terms of where they were working, we deliberately sought out the advertising industry in its widest context. So there's a mix of people that I interviewed in media agencies, in creative agencies. Back in my day, they'd all be part of the same agency. That's an aside. I did also interview somebody who was in local government, in the civil service, somebody who'd come out of university into recruitment. He had done maths and economics, I think, as a degree from memory. And somebody, in fact, was the degree apprentice who was in retail banking. And at the age of 19, had been offered the job as a branch manager for one of the major retail banks. 4 themes that came through. Guess what the first one of those is? Money. There was no escaping it. Much like the interviews that I conducted last year with 32 people, these 18 people, money was a very strong theme coming through. I need to be earning 100,000 by 30. If advertising doesn't offer that, we're not looking at it. Back in my day, when I was about 24, I think it was, if you were earning 30 by 30, you were doing well in advertising. That was kind of the rough rule. Don't expect people to survive in London on 25k. If you want top talent, you have to pay for it. Last year I shared a statistic from the research we did, said the average starting salary in advertising in London was 25 to 28. That may have changed since then, I don't know. But it is clearly a very difficult salary to live off. And indeed, the Telegraph had a headline not that long ago, which was, the young won't work for anything less than 40k. Good old controversial headline. Actually, if you read it, it was the young can't work for anything less than 40k in London. It's just simply not doable. And that's kind of a household income. Starting salaries and London rent are a brutal combo. And this theme that came through from more than one person, but was exemplified by this quote, which was, "I had support from my parents." The second big theme coming through, which I was really interested in, and I have to say, quite reassured by, was skills. Yes, these people are university graduates. That is not to say that a university degree necessarily gives you the right to any greater intellectual brain power, but all 18 people that I spoke to said, effectively, I've got a brain inside me. I want it to be used. And I think that came through in some of the previous presentations. So a media exec said strategy appealed because it's about unlocking human truths. This one's interesting. Copywriter who'd studied business and economics at university, but wanted, kind of acknowledged that he had a really strong creative, imaginative approach, said, I always had this balance, loved imagination and creativity, but I studied business and economics. And why he was attracted to advertising was it was that blend of commerciality and creativity. Another media exec said, sociology helped me to understand people's habits and behaviors. And the recruitment guy said, I love talking to people, trying to turn cold calls into something positive. But it wasn't, in terms of skills, wasn't just about brain power. There were other themes coming through that one might say are soft skills, but I would actually argue are not soft skills. They are essential skills for the business place. And dominating that was resilience. Now, you have to, obviously, we all know where we are in terms of the post-COVID period. A lot of these people had pretty average experience at university because part of the time they were in lockdown. But what I think was really interesting, reassuring, insightful, was this idea of their self-awareness. I built a huge amount of self-resilience. This person had taken 18 months and had interviewed, I think applied for about 700 jobs, which there was a similar interview on the BBC recently as well. What doesn't kill you makes you better. These experiences will hold you in good stead. So, skills, they've got brains, they've got resilience. They want it to be used. And by the way, they want it to be paid for when they're being used. The third theme is the spectre of AI. Now, I don't know whether it's a combination of, or one of, confidence, blind optimism, or maybe even naivety. And I'm not just leveling that at this generation of people that I spoke to in the interviews. It could be applied to all generations. But their views on AI, it's not going to be unique enough as you, or my imagination. It's a tool, not a threat. It's obvious when something has been AI generated compared to humanly prepared. But that slide earlier of 3 people, I think, was, pretty good. And then it's not going to replace real creativity, which we've heard throughout the day in terms of the humanness and that aspect of what we as humans have. Although, if you read Ray Kurzweil's Singularity is Near, you might come to a different conclusion. And the final theme, before we get on to the panel discussion, is leadership. And I've actually left, probably alongside money, the most important theme that came through. And their acknowledgement, their recognition of the importance of great leadership and their awareness of what that can do for them. And it's not about take, but it's that acknowledgement that good leaders early on in their career will be really important. And actually, I think it's a real point of difference for companies. So, this person interviewed, it's the first company I've worked for where I have faith in the leadership. This person was about 4 years into their career, had started somewhere else and had switched because of the strength of the leadership and the recruitment process. The difference between a good manager and a great manager is how they handle moments when I'm overwhelmed. I wouldn't have entered the industry if it wasn't for her. This was, the her is referring to a CEO lady running her own company. And the last one, very interesting, and I've selected this quote to represent actually I could have picked out quite a few quotes on this, where showing vulnerability in leadership, question, BS. I want to see vision, focus, and strength. And other people talked about, they read on LinkedIn. They're doing their research on what jobs they want to do, what companies they want to work for. And one person was saying, I was on their LinkedIn site and I checked out the leadership team and there were people talking about their personal problems and their wrapped up as vulnerability. And they said, I don't want to know how vulnerable the leadership team is. Authentic, yes, but I want to see focus, vision, and strength. And in terms of leadership and what can leaders do, the workplace as a USP, it's a great opportunity, particularly post-COVID, to create this sense of community, this sense of belonging. And as one person said, people are fed up staring at their screens. People actually want to come in and make small talk. And actually, of course, that small talk is part of the spark for creativity. It's where ideas can be fostered, so really important. The other theme that came through in the context of leadership was around recruitment and hiring, which is fundamentally the headline of our work stream. And it was acknowledged, a lot of great work has been done, and still a whole lot more needs to be done around DEI. So there was a very strong acknowledgement of the role of leaders in promoting that, in accelerating it and doing it. However, amongst a group of the people that I interviewed, a theme emerged which was kind of an action or reaction to an action. And this was, I'm aware being a white middle-class male is a barrier, but if I'm good enough, I'll make it. So just an acknowledgement, and I think it's something we may explore in the panel discussion around DEI. So, ending on a positive, like last year, and in fact, what advice would they give to people in the room today for encouraging people to join the great industry of advertising and marketing? Last year, I presented these 10 ideas, and I have to say, since then, I've been involved in or been exposed to something like, say, the relationship that the Uncommon Studio has with Ravensbourne University, and I had the pleasure of going to Uncommon Studio and seeing that in action. And I'm sure many of you in the audience would say, hey, yeah, I'm involved in a similar initiative where we're connecting universities, schools to the workplace. Fabulous. Interesting, though, and possibly may have more of an opportunity for the independents than the holdcos, and I don't want to presume here, but just put this out here. Talk about storytelling, fun, lifestyle. Show it's not just suits and corporate boxes. And the other thing that came through from several people was this idea of EGC. Now, I have to say, I'd never heard of EGC. I'd learned something. Employee-generated content. And if you put employee-generated content into things like TikTok, there was a minute-long video of a lady in America at IPG Media Brands, I think it was, sort of going, here's a typical day in the life here. I'm sure it was checked off by senior management before it went out there, but no one knows the product as well as the employees. And there is an authenticity about that when it's done well. Now, of course, EGC may not necessarily be a new concept. For those in the room who are as old enough as me to remember Howard in the Halifax ad, you might argue that's employee-generated content. Now, and finally, to end on a high, a quote from one of the people. Hang on a second. I'm no Trump fan, I'll just put it out there for now. Make advertising glamorous again. So I leave that optimistic, hopeful note. What is glamour? But yeah, why not? This came from the horse's mouth. Make advertising glamorous again. Right, I'm going to take this off now because wearing a red cap is, a MAGA cap is, one can only do for so long. Right, so let's get some perspectives from the horse's mouths, as it were. So I'm going to start by just asking Aaron and Divine to give us a little bit of an insight about their own personal journey from school to where they are now. They will explain where they are now. And kind of your career choices as well. Aaron.
Hello, so I'm Aaron Wallace, and my career in advertising actually goes all the way back to uni. That's sort of where I found my first peak in the interest with advertising. But like a lot of people, I didn't actually study marketing. So around a couple years into doing my anthropology degree, I realized, employability might be an issue. So I started to consider doing other things. And so around my second year, I realized that advertising and marketing was something I'm quite interested in doing, something I'd like to explore further. And then, as fate would have it, I was working at a sports bar at the time, and I met this woman named Emma who owned her own agency, Big Little London. She was having a bad day at the time. She wasn't very happy with the service at the bar, so I ended up speaking to her. And then after she'd warmed up a little bit, I started telling her about myself, my goals, and essentially she sort of set me on the right path, gave me a lot of good tips on how to enter the industry as someone who wasn't coming in with a degree background. From there, I left uni. I started applying for apprenticeships following her advice. I ended up going through the Marketing Academy, who are sort of an organization who help minority and other smaller groups or disadvantaged groups help get break into the industry. And then from there was an opportunity to interview with Amazon. I went through the process there. I got a job there, did my apprenticeship for a year, left, and now I work for AKA, which is an experiences and culture agency just down the road. So yeah.
I should have acknowledged the involvement of the Marketing Academy here and the access that they gave us to Aaron and Divine. But Divine, tell us, there's I think a mic there. Tell us in your words your journey to date.
Hello guys, my name is Divine Katolo. So my interest in marketing came during lockdown. I actually came from the healthcare. My background is in healthcare, so I was at the time studying nursing. My first ever job was a carer in an elderly home, and I also did living care for people who had spinal cord injury, very complex care at the time. And I just during those times, I was just, reflecting and saying that I'm no longer passionate. And at the time, I came out with my own business, and I realized that I really, really enjoyed the marketing aspect of running my business. And then from there, it was just a, a it was just a journey of me figuring things out and how I could pivot into the advertising industry. I then stumbled across a marketing boot camp called WIC, and I did that for 10 weeks. And from doing that marketing boot camp is where I came across the Marketing Academy Foundation. At the time, they were running this workshop. I attended the workshop, and that's where the opportunity to be interviewed at Amazon came. And it was an amazing opportunity. When I did get interviewed by my manager, he recognized me for my potential, and I really, really appreciated that because at the time I so badly, desperately wanted to get my foot in the door. So yeah, and a year later, at my apprenticeship, my contract was extended for an additional 6 months, and I'm currently still there.
Excellent, thank you. And I think what's interesting, there's moments of serendipity, be it Emma at the bar, the guy who interviewed you, and the different routes that you've come into. And that will, I think, we talk about diversity, but for me personally, diversity of thought is probably kind of trumps all the other diversity elements as well. That's not to say that, of course, they're not important, because diversity of thought can come from the DEI aspect. But I do think it's quite interesting the maybe less traditional journeys that you've come on. And who knows, maybe you'll go back and study anthropology later, but because I could see the relevance to advertising and marketing. Maybe nursing clients is, if I'm taking a bit of a leap on that one. Thinking about the presentation I've just given and those insights, I'm interested in both of your perspectives. You know, in what you heard today from those 18 people, or the 200 people in the survey, what do you recognise in the insights there? And maybe is there something you disagree with and go, oh, that's not my thought? Divine, do you want to go first?
Yes, I think there was a prompt that said jobless young person doesn't want to take a job under 40K and under. I honestly disagree, and I can talk from my own experience, because I remember salary did not matter. I was willing to settle on anything. I just wanted my foot in the door. But I feel like the barrier to this is, the barrier to entry. I think there's too many entry-level roles out there that are asking for 1 to 2 years experience, and to me that's not entry level. It's honestly ridiculous if you think about it, especially for somebody like me who so desperately wanted to get my foot in the door, and I went through seasons of rejection, unsuccessful job applications because of this, and there isn't any job ads out there that are promoting, oh, we want to hire you for your potential. No, I had to go through, the marketing foundation academy to realize that my potential is worthy, and my manager who interviewed me at the time, he saw me for my potential, he saw my passion, he saw my drive, and now a year later working at Amazon, I can now be and very confidently say that I can be hired for my skills. But at the time that wasn't the case. So when articles are putting it out there that young people are jobless and they're not going to settle on 40K or whatever it said, but it's ridiculous, because we want to be in these industries, we want our foot in the door, but guys are not giving us the chance.
It's how we create those pathways, those door openers, because clearly, and I've got to know you leading up to today, understand the passion, the skills that both of you have got to offer, and it must be hugely frustrating to have to send loads of applications, but thankfully, you met Emma in the bar, you had a great manager interview you, so all of these things happen. Aaron, what do you think of your observations of the insights from those 18 people?
Yeah, I can touch on money again as well, but maybe from like a slightly different perspective. I see on a lot of the prompts, it's about maybe advertising not having the best paying roles. I will say, as someone who's now been in the industry for a couple of years, even me, there's not a lot of visibility around how wide the advertising ecosystem is. Because I think when people say, oh, well, this role doesn't pay well, they're talking about very specific roles. There are media sales roles where people are making a very good salary every single year, but maybe people don't necessarily associate that with advertising because they're not as familiar with the advertising ecosystem. So I think if we as an industry, or people within the industry rather, could do more to show and inform people, especially at that young age when they're in uni, that actually advertising, there's loads of opportunities. There's a sea of different roles outside even just media buying and planning or creative roles. So I think definitely taking action there and making younger people aware that no, you actually can have a really strong, high-paying career within this industry would be a great start to sort of addressing some of those doubts.
Thank you. And again, last year, a theme that came through strongly was, and it was in the top 10 advice, was how can we demonstrate and communicate the variety of roles? And there really are a wide variety of roles within the advertising industry in its widest definition. I'm conscious, I think if I'm reading the clock correctly, We've got a couple of minutes, so is that couple of minutes including audience questions as well? Yeah, okay, so I will open it out to the audience. Does anybody have questions for Aaron or Divine?
Hi, my name's Nimi. I think one of the questions I have is around, so you got your foot in the door, but when you're talking to your peers, how have you seen much about internship programs? Because I asked about this on LinkedIn, and I think they have sort of reduced a little bit. And then in terms of mentorship, do you have those where you're working now as well, in terms of sort of mentor bodies to help you navigate it? Because I know historically people have said, you know, slightly more diverse people sometimes struggle with that. So have you had mentors, and have you had people talking about sort of internship programs to get your foot in the door?
Yeah, I can go here. So in terms of internships, I'll definitely say internships, apprenticeships, they're extremely, extremely competitive. And there's definitely better internships and apprenticeships than others. Like for example, there's a lot of entry level roles advertised now where they'll stick you on the £5 apprentice wage, even though some of the people coming in are maybe like 21, 22, to the point where it's not even really livable. So apprenticeships or internships, which are actually paying a livable wage, are in even smaller amounts. And then, of course, because everyone wants them, they're extremely competitive. And then on the second part of your question about mentors, I would say, surprisingly, coming into the industry, looking at my last couple of years, I have a lot of peer mentors. So not necessarily a lot of people with 10, 20 years experience is who I speak with all the time, but I'll speak to people who I worked with at Amazon or people who work at other agencies. And we do have a lot of open conversations. We'll speak about wages. How much do you think is realistic to ask for at my next promotion? How long is it taking you to get promoted? We have a lot of these very candid and honest conversations, which maybe we wouldn't feel comfortable having with some of our other older peers. But with that being said, there's still people you meet throughout the industry who are a little bit older, who are always willing to help. It's just a thing of you may not always be in the same circles or the same spaces as some of your younger peers. Devon, did you want to add anything?
Great.